So back in May of this year, we looked at the original design and prototype of this board. You all had a lot of constructive feedback, so Odin Gaming went back to the drawing board, and now they're back today with the final retail version of the Nova 65. You ready? Let's go! So the Nova 65 is priced at $159.99 US and should be available for shipping pretty soon to when you're seeing this video. These units arrive as a fully assembled bare bones kit, so no switches or caps included. They do include stabilizers. Inside the box, you'll also get a plastic keycap puller and a pretty decent switch puller that's rubber coated. Your copy will include a color matched USB-C cable as well. My early copies don't include this. These are available in both black and white, both with matching aluminum plates, PCB colors, and case feet as well. The process on the white version is a true e-white coating. It is available at no additional charge. That's pretty crazy because normally coatings like this come with an upcharge of between $20 and $50, so this is pretty good to see. The case itself is much beefier than the prototype board. You can see that these bezels are like 6 millimeters all the way around the case. They do have nice curved edges everywhere. My black copy has a couple very minor flaws in the anodizing. My white copy is essentially flawless, which you love to see at this price point. The case bezels do have good height as well. They're going to obscure that view of the switch from most angles. It's got some heft to it too, weighing in at around 720 grams. It's top heavy because the lower still has that polycarb plate window in there. This has a light frost or a diffusion to it this time around with the Odin Gaming logo applied. The idea here is that there's 7 large down-firing LEDs that are meant to throw an underglow, and they've increased the height of the rubber feet to allow for this, but my copy still doesn't do this. Regardless of whether it's on a desk mat or a flat desktop, even with limited ambient light in the room, I cannot get this effect to punch. This window is affixed to the lower case in the 4 corners and not in the middle, so it does really flex and it rattles, and I am concerned about how this will affect the overall sound of the board because it kind of acts like a drum head. Case itself is assembled with 8 recessed, really long Torx screws. I've never wanted a motorized screwdriver so bad in my life. Pulling these halves apart, we see why they went with larger bezels, and that's to accommodate the move to a gasket mount, which was a surprising change. The Poron strips are embedded in the case itself in both the upper and the lower. This simply gives the board a bit of flex if you go looking for it. Now, realistically, you're not going to experience that flex just in the typing experience, but rather it dampens out the bottom out of the keys. This causes a bit of a thing with the USB-C connector. Boards like the GMMK Pro or the Q1 use a separate daughter board to handle the cable connection because you don't want that port moving around. The Nova uses a setup where the port is on a little standoff attached to the main PCB. It sits completely flush with the outside of the case, which means you'll see some exposed section of the connector. It also means you'll have a larger opening on the case as the port needs to be able to travel with the PCB. In this case, they're trying to sandwich a Poron strip that has adhesive on one side in between the PCB and the plate tab. This means you'll have a bit of Poron strip bunched up in that opening and the side of the PCB is visible. It's a functional solution, but definitely not the most elegant in terms of design or aesthetic. It can be tricky to get the plate assembly out because it's stuck on that gasket and it just doesn't look great. This did allow them to make sure all the sockets are all facing the right direction, so unlike that first prototype, we don't have the escape in the 1 sockets inverted. This is a 65% layout, so you get your dedicated arrows and 4 extra keys on the far right column. They've also redone the modifiers to the right of the spacebar for a more standard approach of having 2 1.25U keys and blocking between the arrows. I like that. The PCB here is designed by Yeonkar, the same designer from the Novel Keys boards. They retain VIA support here too, which is great to see. The sockets here are 5-pin hot swap with south-facing LEDs from Kailh. The included stabilizers are Durock V2s, PCB mounted. You love to see it. These arrive with no factory lube, which allows you to tune them yourself without undoing a poor factory lube job first. This is a move that really draws a line between the casual user and the enthusiast, because to make the most of this board, you really need to lube these stabs. That's not just one stab making all that noise on the white copy. You can see the other dry stabilizers rattling as well, versus over on the black copy, I've lubed all the stabilizers there, so there's no rattle anywhere. Depending on your method, you may or may not need to take your board apart to do this. It's easiest to just grab a syringe 205 grade 0 kit from like Kinetic Labs, which I will link down in the description, and Alex Zotos has a great video on this. Because I'm taking these boards apart anyway, I did mine with the old reliable 205 grade 0 on the housing and dielectric grease for the wire. Worth pointing out too that there are generous openings in the plate for stabilizer clearance. That was an issue on the first go round, and this has been completely fixed here. They're also offering an optional machined polycarb plate for $24.99, so we'll hear it with both plate options. I'm pleasantly surprised here. I really expected that window in the lower to be a much bigger deal. I don't get really any case ping here at all, and I don't get a large hollow sound like I thought I would. I do get a little bit of metal reverb with the aluminum plate, and I do hear some characteristic in the space bar that's probably caused by bouncing off that plate, but overall, I feel like the vast majority of users out there would have no problem with how this board sounds stock. That does bring up an interesting point though. With the bottom being see-through, there's not any place to really hide some of the jankier looking acoustic mods like polyfill. With those downfiring LEDs not really providing any underglow anyway, you definitely could. Like, you could go ahead and tape mod this or fill the bottom with polyfill. The fact that it's sitting on the desk the majority of the time means you're probably not going to see that anyway. I like the PC plate better in terms of both sound and feel, but be warned that you will need to load your switches in the plate assembly outside the case. There's just too much flex to get everything seated properly when it's all installed in the case, with the top right corner being especially problematic, and you'll probably end up bending a bunch of switch pins too. If you're gonna run the PC plate, this kind of adds a layer of pain in the assness to hot swapping, because you're gonna need to disassemble your entire board to swap those out. I also have to mention that during 2 of the typing tests, one of the little nuts that holds the standoff came off, which required the entire board to be disassembled to fix. And I did check all of them for tightness before I assembled. This happened on both copies of this board, which is a real drag because I feel like the actual vibration of typing is what caused these to come loose and fall off. I also want to touch on these caps, which are Dye-Sub PBT and come in at $49.99. The legends are a lot cleaner and more consistent this time around, but I'm not crazy about these. I like the white better than the black because doing reverse Dye-Sub is tough. That's why you don't end up with a true black on these and more of like a dark charcoal. The spacebar on the black set shows some really bad warping as well, which I'm not seeing on the white. The black also scratches and scuffs pretty easy. I do like that they've included compatibility for more than just their board, but these definitely fall under what I'd consider a budget option. For value, it's tricky because there's a lot out there competing at this price point, maybe not specifically in a 65% aluminum hot swap board, and I don't know what shipping costs are going to look like, so it's tough to get a feel for like total price paid. But at $160, it's punching right up there price point wise with the GMMK Pro and the Q1, and those are dangerous waters for this board to be in. Obviously, the need to have or not have the function row that you see on a 75% layout will make up that decision for a lot of people, and you won't have support for a rotary knob now or likely in the future with this board. While neither of those competing boards are perfect, they both exhibit a more refined product in terms of design and execution. I think the interesting board here for the Nova is the white copy, because you're not going to score a true white version of either of those boards, and this is a deal on an E-White board. Even an E-White Tofu 65 costs like $195. Just simply having that real white colorway available could tip the scales. On the Pros, it's got a unique design. It's got gasket mount that feels pretty good. It's hot swap, it's VIA compatible, comes with quality stabs, and it sounds surprisingly good in its stock config. For cons, the USB-C port is pretty clumsy. The polycarb plate adds a big layer of frustration if you don't know how to tackle it the right way going in, which your average user is probably not going to know how to do, and those nuts on the back of the plate standoffs were a definite issue for me. While I do applaud the effort to bring something unique to the space and not just another aluminum rectangle, the polycarb window really doesn't bring a lot to the table, especially since it misses on the underglow. It makes me a bit concerned that there is some inconsistency on those windows between the 2 copies, with the white copy feeling like it has a much better fit. So it's a tough conclusion today because some of this board feels really good and some of this board still feels like it's pretty prototype. It is a big step forward from the initial board that we looked at, and it is tricky because, being completely honest, I'm not sure you can find a 65% layout with this feature set at this price point, especially not with an E-White coating. Your mileage may vary and some people may see value here, but based on my experience with my copies and the red flags for quality control, I hesitate to give this run of this board a recommendation. All right, any questions, hit me in the comments and I will catch you all in the next one. Stay up.